All right, all right, all right. Greetings and welcome back once again. We are currently under the palm. We are under the palm. It is 8 o'clock on Monday night. I believe we have Sister Brianna with us. So hold on. All praise be to the Most High, the Holy One of Creation. Welcome to the conversation, Sister Brianna.
Hey, Sean, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear. How's everything?
Not bad, not bad.
You want to go ahead and run up to the starting line with us, Sister Mine. I know it's 8 o'clock and the people are just making their way over. Well, work up to the starting line with us about this conversation in the past and possibly why we had to, you know, wheel and come again selected. Why we talking about it again.
From from what I understand, the way this went down was someone thought that the harsh words and treatment that we received was akin to domestic discipline and appropriate. And so, that was very interesting, seeing as how we had done an entire segment right here, I believe, under the palm. Was it under the palm, or did we do it over at Liberty Lessons?
I believe it was somewhere. I think it was
It was
somewhere. We
two
did it
years
though. We
ago.
did it.
It was 2 years ago, and so it was interesting. But I think what made it more disturbing was he tried to attach scriptures to it, which apparently is not all of that unusual, even if it is incredibly disturbing, because domestic discipline does have some intersection with Christianity. There's an entire domestic discipline called, as you know, CDD, which is Christian domestic discipline, which does the same thing, align it with biblical principles and assert that this is a Christian idea.
Indeed. There's so many things to talk about. I think
Yeah.
in the beginning, what kind of raised the red flag, and again, I invited the brother Ike who forwarded this in my inbox. Um, After I let him know that we had this type of discussion in times past and that we would be willing to have the discussion again, I really didn't get a comeback. And so I let him know, even tonight, that we would be having this discussion because it's only fair to, give the person an opportunity to show up if they choose to. And I find it interesting that just following the post that he did share on Facebook, a lot of the pushback was deleted. And
Mhm.
so there's kind of like that closed door. I don't want to hear what you have to say, but this is what is said. What are your thoughts on that so far?
Well, I always find it extremely telling when people do not want another side of a thought to be seen or explored, when the person has to be the only voice in the room and feels the need to guide the conversation so that only one thought is acceptable. That's already wildly problematic. And so the fact that he did that speaks to some maybe not so sure, not so secure in this particular thought process, because it's indefensible in the face of pushback, as you said, or feedback, as we would normally say.
The picture, I think, for me is what triggered the thought. Like, wait a minute, I've seen this picture before. And a picture with the dude in the face, like, yo, I'm about to deal with you. I was like, wait a minute, this picture looks familiar, and sure enough, it was. And it's actually coming from what has splintered off from CDD or domestic discipline, or this cult of dismissity, this domesticity type of thought,
Uh-huh.
is the melanating, getting busting out your brown crayon and going in on it. What do and this is kind of the part that we were looking at because this is where we got wind from when it kind of blew over the fence into the community.
Right.
Do you remember your initial thoughts when seeing the whole melanated depiction of it and the proponent, one of the biggest ones on YouTube, saying this is good, this is what's going to get you, get your relationship right.
Yeah, at first we were looking at why, or what was deactivated in the melanated woman for her to embrace this thought process that she needed to be tamed in this way, or that this is the kind of address that she needed in order to achieve some type of righteousness. Even though I think this woman was secular in her approach and her reasoning for doing it, there was still that idea of she needed to have this kind of enforcement, this kind of physical reinforcement in order for her to behave. So, what was feeding the mentality of the woman, of the melanated woman, to believe that, number one, that she is incapable of making good decisions on her own, or that she should be tamed. I think this idea of being hit in a way that is acceptable, that is acceptable hitting in a relationship, is already uh, wrong-headed. It's already a wrong idea.
All right. So for those who just joined us again, we invited. There was a lot of feedback. Um, under the palm in the discussion, there was a lot of you know, a lot of people who were surprised that this was actually happening. Some didn't really believe that this was a position that's being forwarded. And we definitely invite everyone, even though you may be a little bit, uh, coming a little bit later to the discussion. Do you want to go into some of? I'm not sure if you have it pulled up, but do you want to go into some of the substantiating verses that he used to say that this is a thing and should be a thing?
I do. I don't have it pulled up, but it would be really easy to do that. I have to go back into Facebook because I am in front of the PC. So, if I'm not mistaken, a copy of that very troubling post is also on my personal page. So, I should be able to get to it relatively quickly.
All right. I'm gonna open up while you're looking for that. And then,
I think
okay,
I think it's definitely a great way to approach it by looking at some of the thoughts that, as you said, are being forwarded to substantiate this. I think that it was really interesting to see some of the feed. I found it the February 18th post. Um, some of the feedback that we got when we opened up the conversations, and I'm really looking forward to us opening up the conversation and
right.
getting it from the audience here on the YouTube side of things. Maybe since we have a little time as people are coming in, it'll be a good time to say, listen, if you would like to follow these discussions before we go on the air and get an invitation to come to these discussions, that we do have a Facebook group that you are welcome to come to suggest topics, to ask to be here. The URL, the link for that, I can read it off to you, but Imuna, we're gonna put that also under the video.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so it's facebook.com/groups with an S /UT and then the full word palm. So that's UTPALM. So together that's facebook.com/groups/UT palm. But you just heard Amuna affirm that she will also just give you the link so that we don't have those problems. Amuna, you want to start off with the
Yeah, his
with the
first
first
his
one?
he over here doing them scripts. He dropping them scripts on us. Ike, if you out there, holla. We would like to hear from you, man. We want to hear from you. Hebrew Israelite Awakening, as you said, I could only conclude that this was dropped in my box, just like blam, because of the interaction that happened over on Debate Talk for you, and justifying some unjustifiable behavior. So,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, this is even more troubling than just it floating around. It was used to say, see, this is the reason why, you know, which is
Right.
a problem in and of itself. Okay, we first it starts off by saying discipline in marriage Bible study. So it has a lovely heading here, and then it says Proverbs 5:1 and 6. My son, pay attention to my hallelujah. I have to say hallelujah. Crowd, here, I'm gonna need the peace of the Creator just reign in my heart right now. My son, pay attention to my wisdom, lend your ear to my understanding, that you may preserve discretion and your lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of an immortal or a moral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet, yeah, you gotta say it. Her feet go down to death, and her steps lay hold of Sheol. Lest you ponder her path of life, her ways are unstable. You do not know them. I, be- I believe if you continue, isn't this the adulterous woman?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Right.
okay.
This is not the woman in general. This is not your wife. This is not, your it's not. It's certainly not any righteous woman that just needs a little extra guidance or some kind of discussion. And even here, I think, did I miss the part where you beat her? Is it there that you?
No, yeah, that's why I'm slipping. That's why I did his little, fragmented Psalms reading there. I'm not trying to be funny, brother, but me, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the whole thing because I could be tripping, right? So I'm
Right.
like, okay, let me see what else is going on here. And even when you look it up, it's like the proverb against the adulterous woman.
Mm-hmm.
Her feet go down to death, lest you should ponder the path of life. Her ways are movable. Hear me now, O children, depart not from my ways, remove far from her. So it doesn't say like put her over your knee and beat her. In verse 8, it says, remove thy way far from her and come not nigh the door of her house. That means that's not even your wife,
Right.
right? Lest you give
Right.
your honor unto others and your years to the cruel. Lest strangers be filled with thy wealth and the labors be in the house of a stranger. That means you don't even have the right to be at her crib. I could go on, but if we read this in context, as you said, Sister Miranda, I'm not sure that this is his Isha.
Mm. And even if, and let's say someone finds some way to very creatively assert that it is, the solution is still to leave and not to beat. It's you depart. You don't discipline. You don't chastise. You go away. You
Hmm.
don't put your hands on somebody else's child.
Hmm. I forgot to read the title. Tapping that ass. Right? Does the Bible support domestic discipline? So we tapping, I'm saying, on the computer because we got questions.
Right.
And so you tapping that ask. What I mean?
Uh
And so
huh.
that's the first tap right there now. That's the first tap. Proverbs 5 in its totality, like you said, it doesn't say anything about, rolling up on anybody with a paddle, a spoon, the back of your hand. It says, don't even go by her crib because her way is the way onto Sheol.
That's right.
All right, sister, I'll go ahead and hit it over the fence to you. So let's see if Proverbs 19 got anything for us. That's the next thing on the list. Proverbs 19:21, 29. Surely something
Yeah.
up in there is going to help
Proverbs.
us.
Well, yeah. Well, at least we get into some of this putting hands on the person, as they say. Proverbs 19:29 reads, "Judgments are prepared for scoffers, and beatings for the backs of fools."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Go
Yeah, that's all he gave.
ahead,
That's all he
sis. You
gave.
gotta,
Here
you
you go
gotta,
again.
you, you gotta break it down. Break it
Well,
on down.
according to the proverb, the wisdom of this verse says that judgment is prepared for scoffers, which we know a scoffer is someone who uh, will dismiss wisdom, or someone who hears a wise thing, or is confronted with wisdom or good judgment, and necessarily, if they are dismissive of wise counsel, then appropriate judgment will follow or consequences will follow. And again, this is speaking specifically of someone who is dismissive of good judgment, and this person is considered a scoffer. And once again, there's no gender attached to it. It just simply says for scoffers. It goes on to read, "and beatings for the backs of fools." Once again, this is not gender specific. It's not speaking about why women or wives, let alone wives. It's speaking specifically about the foolish. And I would probably argue here that when the wisdom in our wisdom scriptures, it's usually in reference to being in violation of something that the creator has put in front of us, and not the something that annoys or is to the displeasure of the man or the HOH. We'll talk more about what the HOH is, but there's also this idea of this beatings within CDD or regular DD is at the discretion or displeasure of the man, and it has no other bounds. I'm sure we'll explore that as the conversation continues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're gonna put that one in the maybe pile. That's where that one goes.
But I don't know. I'm still kicking it out the box because there's no woman here. This is just
Right.
very general.
It's very
And
general.
yeah, I mean, if we use this, and this means that it could apply to the man as well. But CDD and DDD says that it can't apply to the male. So since this looks like it could go either way, it doesn't fit.
Mm. Okay, if it don't fit, we must acquit. We're
That's what
gonna
I heard.
roll. Yeah, that's what Doctor said. We're gonna roll over to Proverbs 26:3, to see, because so far we about 1/4 of the way down through the Bible study here, and now we're in the wisdom saying here. We're in the wisdom saying 26:3, a whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the fool's back.
Wow.
So these both did 1929 and 26:3. I wish he was here. Now there's no wishing, but brother, come through because maybe you can explain it a little better. You know what I mean, and to help us get some understanding. But so far, what I'm seeing is that if a fool doesn't listen, then you have to resort to physical violence,
Right.
right? So um in these both proverbs written by Shalomo, more than likely, he's telling you what it will curb a fool. But then there's other proverbs that say no matter how many times you chastise a fool, they're not going to turn or they're not going to learn. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then it tells you about rebuking a wise man and he will be wiser still. So it's interesting that there's a whole lot of fool proverbs, but only the ones that pull out that speaking about hitting the individual is the ones that were put here. You understand what I'm saying? As if the Proverbs doesn't instruct you in other ways to deal or not to deal with a quote fool. And so I find that one interesting. But I'm gonna go look for some of those Proverbs. I'm gonna go ahead and give it's your turn, sis. Sirach
So where are we
26.
putting this one? This is a dismissal as well. We're dismissing this one too.
No, I'm gonna go see because again, okay, I'm gonna do some tippy tapping because I'm tapping the ask here because I have some questions about why only these two were selected for the fool and whether or not, like you're saying, these are talking about the fool, which would usually indicate that you're transgressing in some way or you're not being wise. And
Right.
that would be the commands of the Most High and not necessarily how much brown you want on your biscuit. You understand what I'm saying? So then
Right.
who or what determines that that person is foolish and needs to be chastised in this way because of that foolishness? You understand? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm kind of trying to. I have to play. I don't like the word devil's advocate, but I'm trying to see. Okay, where is he going with this? Because he put it up there, so there has to be some type of reasoning behind that. But go ahead, go ahead. I believe the next one is Sirach. I'm gonna.
Yeah. We're in Sirach 26, chapter 26, verse 24 through 27, beginning at verse 24. A shameless wife is vulgar in public, but a good woman is modest, even alone with her husband. 25. If a wife does what she pleases, she is no better than a dog. But if she is ashamed to do wrong, she will fear the Most High. 26. Everyone can tell that a wife is wise if she honors her husband. But if she is proud and refuses, they will see she is ungodly. Yes, a man who is married to a good woman is happy, and he will live twice as long. Finally, verse 27. But the constant talking of a loud wife is a trumpet signal for battle to begin, and her family will live in the chaos of war.
Hmm. There's a lot there.
Mm-hmm. Of a surety, this is talking about a woman who is causing difficulty in her home. We have seen in other proverbs that a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman would take it down with her own hands. And so just this idea of there being the wise and the foolish woman, or the wise woman and the woman of folly, is not new. What is a new introduction to the thought is that the remedy to a foolish woman, a shameless woman, a loud woman, or the like, is that you put your hands on her and beat her. And we don't see that as the remedy even here. Just describing someone that is difficult or not ideal wife is, no one's arguing that there's such a woman that can happen.
Mhm. Very interesting. I'm gonna check here. Topping that ask. Aisha is funny. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're looking at it, and I would agree that the text does bear out. Some would say that it's interesting that it bears out what is a righteous woman and what is a foolish woman and wife. But then in the space of how does or if she is able to determine whether or not she has a righteous husband or whether or not his actions are righteous,
Mm,
some will say that is not as spelled out.
right.
You see, and this is where this level of it becomes vague, and a lot of people are questioning. You can directly go to Sirach, you can directly go to the foolish woman, and then what are you going to use to measure whether or not the things that he's asking you to do are righteous or whether or not they're unjust? Um, One of the scripts that came to my mind is a wicked woman is given as a portion
That's
to
right.
a wicked man, which is Ecclesiasticus or the wisdom of Sirach 26 and 23. And so far, if she is a fool, we already said the first one, that's somebody else's wife, first of all. But the next three, if she is a fool, that would that reflect on you as the man? And as you're saying, is the course of action then to do the whole, you told Harpo to beat me type of conversation?
Hmm.
That's the color purple. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have. I mean, for me, it's the same. But there is nothing here that says the remedy to you having a problem with your wife or your woman is that you beat her. And since that's pretty much the discussion, I mean, there's also a series of scriptures that describe what kind of man to avoid. You avoid a forward man. You avoid a man that a man of strife. A man that's always angry. There's a list of men that you are told to avoid, and a list of qualities and characteristics that we're told are unseemly. So this idea that only women have these characteristics, and you have to be weary of women because women are the sole proprietors of these behaviors, that just speaks to not knowing the
Mm-hmm.
fullness of the text.
All right, now we on track. For those who just joined us, shout out to everyone who's in the room. If you'd like to join us on the other side of this panel, feel free to let us know. You can get the link, no problem. So we okay, we're working the way down. But again, we're trying to stay on track. We're not trying to hijack the thing. So,
Right.
because this would be given to somebody. This would be like the starter kit, you know what I mean? As to why this, and I would just say in other spaces, it's supposed to be consensual. But the way in which, if you're going to use this premise in that picture, it's supposed to be consensual. But the way in which this is presented is saying that the man is endowed with this ability
Right.
based on these scriptures. You know what I mean? So we're at Sirach 26:23. A lawless man will get a godless wife as he deserves, but a man who honors the Most High will have a devout wife.
That's pretty much what you said before.
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much it. But I found that is interesting of the translation that was went
Mm-hmm.
for. It's the actual same verse, but the translation just sounds a little different, don't it?
Doesn't it?
A lawless man will get a godless wife. It took the sting out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A wicked woman is a portion to a wicked man. So you know how you go to a script and it has all these different translations you can choose from? And you're like,
Right.
oh, this one sounds kind of nice. I think I'll go with this one. But
Right.
it's basically indicating that the what you got is a direct reflection to a certain degree of who you are.
Right.
So are you beating her to be more like you or to be less like you? I'm not, you know
Or
what I'm
are
saying?
you? I mean,
Mhm.
according to this verse, the verse says that you have attracted what you put out. You're a wicked man,
Mm-hmm.
so you have this is your portion. This
Mm-hmm.
is what you deserve. Like it says here, you deserve. This is your portion. This is what you have
Mm-hmm.
inherited. This is what you have attracted unto yourself. So what are you exactly punishing her for?
Mm.
You attracted this. You don't attract anything better than that. So you're beating her for being you.
Actually, there, weirdly and strangely, you do have some parents
Mm,
with that mentality who will lash out on the child because the child is so much like them. And that part of them that they don't like in them, it's represented in the child. And so they take that out on the scene, so to say. So
right.
that might be something there.
But we've also talked about even in adult relationships, where we find that when we try to interrogate why we get so much negative pushback from men, and there's all kinds of studies that assert that it's because our men see in us the failures, like the
Right.
failures to protect, the failure to provide, the failure to maintain. And so rather than own up to that because that's too painful or that's too difficult, they say, okay, well, it's your fault. You should not have done, you're less than. And so it's easier psychologically than to deal with that kind of psychological pain and self-reflection or self-condemnation. So that gets reflected back. The idea, even when we talk about this kind of Genesis idea, that when the woman was brought outside of the man, she was a mirror for him. So if we keep that idea that the woman kind of reflects back to the man his purpose or whatever, then if he feels that he hasn't accomplished anything, that's a mirror that needs to be broken.
When you see me go on a little extended mute, that's the babies rolling up on the kid. But yeah, most definitely. Again, there's something definitely going on here that is beyond what's on the surface. And as we said, there is a psychology to someone who would want to forward such a thought in the community as a viable solution to what you're experiencing. Instead of taking personal accountability, like you're saying, you're seeing yourself and you don't like what you're seeing, so then you get mad at the mirror.
Right?
Um, where are we here? Sirach 42 and 14. A man's wickedness is better than a woman's goodness. Women bring shame and disgrace. Hold on, I'm gonna have to read that in that, yo, but how you like how Sirach 26 and 23 says wickedness, but the selection was lawlessness.
Right.
But then 24, wickedness pops back up again. You know what I'm saying? Like, which translation is this? Hold on, y'all. Yeah, give me a little minute. This is on the fly. Let me go ahead and look this up so we can see what is in and around this here verse. The verse just look lonely, don't it? It
Mm.
don't look like it's supported by anything. Hold on one second. And for those who don't know, or maybe have forgotten, you might be like, Ecclesiasticus is in the Apocrypha.
Right.
Where are we here? 24:14, is that what it said? Where did
Mm.
it go? I'm over here looking for it, and
It's
I don't see
42:14.
I'm trying to put it in so that I can pull up the whole verse before that. Okay, Sirach 42 and where are we here? 14. Okay. So it says a little bit before this. Let's just go a little bit before. Um, let's start at 8. Be not ashamed to inform the unwise and foolish, and the extreme age that contendeth with those that are young. Thus shalt you be truly learned and approved of all men living. 9. The father waketh for the daughter when no man knoweth, and the care for her taketh away sleep when she is young, lest she pass away the flower of her age, and being married, lest she should be hated. That's a whole nother story right there.
Mm-hmm.
10. In her virginity, lest she should be defiled and gotten with child in her father's house. That's interesting because I'm gonna stay on track. Hold on. I'm gonna stay on track. Let me stay on track. Where are we? So unless she get belly, then I'm like, yo, we have to watch her before she breathe. Okay. And then it says, and having a husband, lest she should misbehave herself. And when she's married, lest she be barren. Keep a sure watch over a shameless daughter, lest she make thee a laughing stock to thine enemies, and a byword in the city, and a reproach among the people, and make thee ashamed before the multitude. Behold, not everybody's beauty, and sit not in the midst of women. For the garment cometh a moth, and from women wickedness. So Sirach is saying some stuff. So that just frames the whole thing. Better is the churlishness of a man, curlishness of a man, than a courteous woman, and a woman, I say, which bringeth shame and reproach. So if we read it a little bit before, and let me read one more after. I will now remember the works of the Most High and declare the things that I have seen, in the words of the Most High are his words. So he kind of gives context, although if you pluck it out of context, it's like, from the woman comes wickedness. If you're reading it before, it's talking about a young girl in her father's house who, in today's day and time, they're trying to say may be fast and may be forward and may lose her virginity, and the whole tokens of her virginity will not be discovered, and her parents will be a laughing stock. And you know what I'm saying? This type of thing is happening. And I'm being led that his next statement is dealing with the statement that came before. I could be wrong. So, Sister Maya, are you there? And if you're in the listening audience and you want to share your thoughts, come on down. I know y'all are
Listen, I,
shy and all, but come
I
on
put
down.
myself on mute.
Yeah, Ken.
Oh,
So,
listen, I'm having this whole conversation with you. You can't hear a word.
no,
Um, so my answer, what you know what? I said so much I don't remember. Can you repeat the question and I'll go back to what I was
yeah,
saying?
yeah. What I did was went a little bit ahead, because the verse that we were given is a man's wickedness is better than a woman's goodness, which is wild. That's
Well,
unjust weights and measures, isn't it?
it is.
Unjust.
That's what I was saying. I was saying there. It's interesting to read um, the book of Sirach because he goes back and forth with being extremely appreciative and uh, affectionate toward the woman, or at least the way he describes wisdom as a woman, and has all of these flowery things to say about womanhood. And then in other places, he's very critical, maybe a little cynical, and sometimes, we see some of this other kind of um, severe judgment of womanhood. And so I find it interesting that these are the ones that he's gravitating to and making it sound as if, and so it does, like you said, it looks like there's an unjust weight. This particular passage is definitely imbalanced. But Sirach does kind of go back and forth in his ideas about women. We saw just earlier, he said that if you have a wicked woman, it's because you're a wicked dude.
Correct.
So even if that's the idea, and he goes on to say all of these other things about the wicked woman, because we're not going to sit here and pretend as if women are above wickedness and we don't fall into the trappings of bad judgment and other even intentional sin. But we know that these are particular women, and if you get that kind of woman, then there's something about you. And also this idea we talked about before, and I know you wanted to maybe not touch too tough on it, so I'm gonna tap it. But the woman, if a young woman gets pregnant in her father's house, she didn't do that by herself. So there's some man who skirted the proper order for courting and marriage to get her pregnant. But I
Mm,
think we've had many conversations about responsibility and accountability, and that how that falls mostly on the woman because she's the one that carries evidence for 40
right.
weeks, right? So this idea of, even in this conversation that Sirach is having, saying, you know what, no matter how bad the dude is, if the
She's
girl
still
messes
wicked.
up, well, I make a few step back from it. The idea is no matter what, how bad the dude is, and the men say it all the time. She's the gatekeeper. She's the one that's gonna get pregnant. She should be the fact is, the dude can dip in and dip out, but the father is the one that's stuck for the father of the daughter is the one that has to walk around with this girl with a belly for 40 weeks, and the guy can potentially just disappear. So the idea that no matter how wicked the dude is, it's the daughter that can bring shame because the evidence is on her body. So I don't know. I mean, I think that if I took a step back from it, I could see the logic in it. There is some logic to that. Um, and he even goes on to say, you know, your daughter will, the neighbor, the people will look at you away and talk about you because they can see what you did. They don't know what if your son went and impregnated 40 people, there's just 40 different women. You can't really prove that on the son. There's no more Povich in in ancient Israel. So
And
the
this,
dude could do the shaggy with me, and that's it. The girl can't say that with Belly.
mm,
So I can see why the idea is to guard your daughter. Guarding your daughter, there's a whole lot about guarding the feminine body, the female body, the guarding of the female body, the protecting of the female body, the preciousness of the female body. There's so much conversation about that because hers is the body that um, that is has physical evidence. Hers is the body that's going to bring life. You don't want to pollute and defile the space that life is growing in. So
mm.
I'm not always as upset about that kind of idea of being very careful and very critical of the female body because for me it sounds protective and it sounds there's wisdom
So
to it, there's logic to that, it's
did I
practical.
miss? Did I miss the part that you supposed to beat her?
Yeah, we keep missing that.
Oh man.
I missed it too. Maybe it's in that invisible ink. Maybe we have to get one of those pins that you rub
I'm
on the
just trying to
thing.
see. I'm just trying to make sure that it's because that's what we're following this train of thought. I think we're gonna drop that on the box in the group about another discussion that we should have because I want to dig off into this part right here about the
Hmm.
women bringing the shame and disgrace and how men oftentimes in society are absorbed of certain things when these
Yeah.
things wouldn't be the case if you didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? And so there's so much I want to say but I'm like, you. But yeah, I didn't see the whole "you told Harper to beat me" part right there. So yeah, I see where he's going, but you read it in context, it still doesn't justify,
Nope.
you know, busting the paddle out. So we
No.
gonna keep going now. We're gonna keep going and see if
It
we can
looks
see
like
something.
to
Mm-hmm.
me so far we are seeing some more of the same whenever there's an idea that can't be fully justified or explored. They move the goalpost. So originally we're told that we're supposed to be looking for proof that it's okay to beat the woman. And
Mm-hmm.
instead, what he's piling on us is proof that women can be wicked, women can be vulgar, women can be all these things.
Oh,
But that wasn't the objective. That's not what you started off trying to prove. So you move. This what this idea of moving the goalpost is that you forward one idea, but then do your very best to prove another, and then peacock like you did something.
wow. So that's the wicked woman. Okay, so now we're on the wicked woman's trail. We already went to the adulterous woman's house and the wicked woman and how she acts, and the foolish. Even though it doesn't say women, we have the foolish. So, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we're at Ezra now. Like I
Right.
said, I don't know any. We haven't gotten any other men. And just for the record, even before this Bible study, when the initial discussion, just exploring this idea, and the invitation went out, I went personally and invited the people who were forwarding this idea, and go figure. Nobody wants to show up. I don't know why they don't want to show up. We're pretty nice. You know what I mean? Like, show up, come through. Let's have this conversation. But I guess this Bible study is gonna have to do. First Ezra 4:26 through 27. Some men are driven out of their minds on an account of a woman, and others become slaves for the sake of a woman. Others have been put to death, have ruined their lives, or committed crimes because of a woman. I'm sorry, it took me. That sounded like the lyrics of an R&B song. I'm sorry, I'm back now. It did for a minute there. It felt sound like Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm back. My bad. So again, this seems to be on the track of proving why you might, need to get tapped up so that you don't become foolish and let the man go out of his mind or become a slave or lose his life or ruin his life or commit a crime.
Okay.
So possibly these are the preventative measures.
Absolutely. But you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that scene. It may be this. You know, where he's all the way down to the 26th verse, which makes me want to go back and kind of look. But I remember it may very well be an Esdras where a king forwards a question to three people, and
Right,
one of
right.
them being the Hebrews, right? And to find
Yeah.
out which was stronger,
Which is the
whether it was.
strongest? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this sounds like the part of the reasoning given that of all, I think it was between wine, the king, and women,
Women,
that
right.
women were the strongest.
Yeah, I remember that one. Hold on,
So
let me
I
go
think
to.
if we, you know what, I think I'm going to um, see if we're right about that, and if unless you have it already up.
Hey, I pulled it up. Hold on one second. I do remember that portion. Mm. Which is the mightiest? Wait, hell yeah, this is exactly the chapter when the king is asking. And in verse 12, O ye men, how should not the king be mightiest when in such sort he is obeyed? And he held his tongue. Then the third, who had spoken of women and the truth. So, yeah, the whole conversation up until this point, they're asking which is the mightiest. And then he gets into discussing all of the things that came up in the conversation.
So
Hmm.
the idea in that conversation has to do with, again, you know, they're talking about the strongest or the mightiest, and this idea of what has the most influence over the men, and what could stir up the men into action or into certain behaviors. The fact that the Hebrew positioned that men respond to the woman because they're in pursuit of the woman, this is a flaw. This is not supposed to be looked at as a fact. This is a flaw. The man is supposed to have discipline. The Most High. There is no verse that says, "Oh, fear, fear the woman and keep her commandments." You're supposed to fear him, fear the Creator, and keep His commandments. So, if your greatest influence is the woman, then this is wrong-headed. This is a bad thing. So, some men that are driven out of their minds on account of a woman, this is a foolish man.
Uh-oh.
We've already heard about all the things of those things that are foolish. What makes you foolish is going contrary to the wisdom of the and the instruction of the Most High. So if you can be driven out of your mind because of a woman, then there's something terribly wrong with you, or terribly wrong with your relationship, and you lack the fear and obedience to the Most High. We have all of these wisdom sayings that tell the man that he is to have discipline in his own body. Isn't there one that says a man that can keep his body is stronger than a man that can keep or defeat
Take
an
the
entire
city.
city? Yeah. So obviously, this is not speaking of wise men.
And, and can I just add this part? This is how people can twist, contort, and do Pilates with the text, right? They over here doing the yoga text stretch. If you jump down a little bit, you can kind of make it say whatever you want if you're not really being honest. If we jump down to 34 in the same chapter, it says, "O ye men, are not women strong? Great is the earth, high is the heaven, swift is the sun in his course. For he compasseth the heavens round about, and fetcheth forth again to his own place in one day. Is he not great that maketh these things? Therefore great is the truth, and stronger than all things." 36. All the earth cry upon the truth, and the heaven bless it. All words shake and tremble at it, and with it is no unrighteous thing. You ready? 37. Wine is wicked. The king is wicked. Women are wicked. All the children of men are wicked. And such are all of their wicked works. And there is no truth in them. In their unrighteousness also they shall perish. And if I stop right there, I'll be like, aha, see, not only wicked women are wicked, all the men are wicked. Next thing you know, you have wicked men doctrine. You see what I'm saying? So we can play these games if we want to. You stopped at 426 and 27. But if you continue down just a few more verses, we get to where they're having a discussion. And if we go out of context, then we could justify saying, hey, everybody wicked. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the issue that I find where we are like willing to play around with the text and not be honest about what's going on or what the person's desire is, and we try to blame it on the text and say this is what's informing me, and that is wicked because we're adding to the text and taking away from it to make it say what we want it to say. You want me to read that part again, Sister Mindy? You sound like you wanted to comment on that everybody wicked part.
No, actually, I want to hear again the part where after there's this exposure about why the king, the wine, and the women are wicked. This idea of the truth is what we
Uh,
talk, right? What is good and why these things are wicked goes back to what we were saying before. That this is showing that if you can be swayed by the woman, that you are wrong headed. You are in the wrong relationship. You're not dealing with the Most High the way that you should.
so let me go
Where
ahead and
was that
tap.
kind of said?
It's as for the truth, it endureth and is always strong. It liveth and conquereth forevermore.
Hallelujah.
So in contrast to all of the things where the things can falter, wine can, it tells you wine, it talks about wine. Solomon talks about wine in the wine bibber and what it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to do. The king, we've seen many wicked kings. We've seen wicked women and wicked children of men with
Mm-hmm.
their wicked works. But the truth, it says, and there is no truth in them. So truth is what establishes you and endures and allows you to endure, right? And so this is something that we're searching out and continue to searching out is whether or not we are coming truthfully to the text, or whether or not we're using it, manipulating it so that we can manipulate others, which would mean that that's a wicked act and a wicked thought. I'm gonna go ahead and back this one over to you, sister.
Yes, hallelujah.
You done jumped into the you done jumped
Uh,
over into Luke now.
yeah, yeah, we're on the other side of Malachi. Let me pull it up. I went to go look up Ezra with you. Okay, so Luke 12, verses 47 through 48, beginning with 47. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare themselves or do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But the one who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from them much will be required, and to whom much has been committed, of whom they will ask the more.
So now she's moved from the fool to the servant, I
Ah,
suppose.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So that would.
that's where the
Mhm.
that's that ownership, um possession relationship
Okay.
that is highlighted and emphasized this side of Malachi. And so there's a lot of room kind of for misinterpretation or reinterpretation of the text that subordinates the woman in such a way that she can be subjected to the whims and ideas of the men. In a recent conversation with a man who is positioned this side of Malachi, he told me directly a woman has to do everything
Oh wow. Okay.
that the man says. And that's everything, right? And so when the question was posed, everything, and then, everybody wants to run around and go, well, a righteous man. Okay, well, you didn't say a righteous man, and you did say everything, right? And then even in pursuing that line of thought, there was the defense a righteous man can fall 7 times. So even in his fallen state, your job is to suck it up and figure out a way to do everything this man says.
We gonna
And
definitely we gonna have to come back to that thought because yeah, we're gonna have to come back. I wish brothers, if you out there, press one. Oh, you can't even press one on this thing. If you out there, hit us up in the inbox, man. We need to hear some of these thoughts because again, there's a one brother said, who is saying this? You know what I'm saying? There's a certain type of mentality. I was like, yo, we're not making this up. Here it
not
is.
on.
And
Oh,
he was
very
in
popular.
disbelief, like, are you kidding me?
Mm-mm,
No, this thought is not looking for the helpmate.
mm-mm.
Because if she is your what was the name of that show? If she's your Stepford wife,
Oh my.
if you're programming her, then you have become her God.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have put yourself in the stead of the creator, which then becomes a problem. And you deactivate her so that she can't do her job. I don't even want to go too far off. Maybe we'll cap this conversation with that discussion about that everything concept and thinking that you can be the feminine principle better than the feminine principle could be the feminine principle. Because in
Mm-hmm.
order for her to do everything that you prescribe, that would mean that you know
Right.
everything that the creator has already innately put in her. You know everything that needs to be done and how it needs to be done.
Well,
And
I'd
that's
like to read a comment from one of the brothers who's he's on my side when we asked about this question of domestic discipline. His response was, unless there's a man or woman out there teaching from sacred schools saying husbands may chastise wives with physical punishment, I'm going to have to say no. And he says, no. I can't think of any reason I would treat my wife as a child and
mm,
not, quote, withhold the rod, unless it's sexual banter.
right.
So this
Good.
is from one of our sane brothers who don't believe that they have to physically, I'm going to say discipline, since they are very adamant and saying that it's not abuse. So we'll say domestic discipline, since that's the preferred language. But in honesty, when we look at it, again, take a step back, it's clearly domestic violence. Domestic violence has the three components of power, control, and dominance. And these are the three shared components with domestic discipline. And since you have all three factors in the so called domestic discipline, I don't see how it can be separated from abuse, domestic abuse. And the fact that they have the hubris and audacity to implicate the Bible from either side of Malachi to justify this is just absurd. It's I got into so much trouble for saying absurd the last time. I'm
Hey,
like,
you
should
might
I
not want
say
to
it
say
again?
absurd. Don't say absurd. We're gonna go, we're gonna I think we have two more verses. We at the tail end of this here
Mm-hmm.
provided Bible study we have here. And so let's see here, it says Hebrews 12.
Yeah.
It says 6 to 11. For whom the Lord loves, he chastises or chastens and scourges every son with whom he receives. If you enduring chasten, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, or with which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chasten us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present. Like, you girl, you ain't gonna like this, but it's for your own good. But painful nevertheless. Afterward, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Okay.
I'm gonna take water, a drink of water on this one,
Uh
y'all.
huh.
Hold
I'm gonna have to sip
on.
some tea because.
Yeah, so that man, see,
Okay, so is it me or is he now your daddy in this?
okay, we have Mind Seeker. Mind Seeker says he's a guy. Maybe he can help. Definitely Mind Seeker. Let us know if you want to join the conversation. All we ask is that you keep it clean and professional, no cursing and things of that nature. And you can definitely join the conversation. So let me know, and I'll drop the link for you so that you can add into this discussion. Just put it in the box, and then I'll just drop the link. Uh, Now she went from the possible harlot, adulteress, to the fool, to the son, but not really the son, a daughter. No, to the daughter who may be creeping in the house, and now the wife, or to a wicked woman. And now there's a possibility that you're gonna understand why I need to do this, because I love you. This is what I'm getting. So because the creator or the father chastises the children, then you should be chastised in the same way, and you should count it as love. Did I get that correct?
Yeah. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. This is
That's love. We
heavy.
got one more. We got one more. We're back in Sirach. I don't know why we jumped out of Sirach. We flew out of Sirach, but we back. So we're gonna end off on the Sirach 25, 24 to 26.
And this is really interesting. Okay, so it's funny that he goes to Sirach after having been on that side of Malachi for so long. He goes into sin began with a woman, and we must all die because of her.
Oh, wow.
25. Don't let a bad wife have her way, any more than you would allow water to leak from your cistern. 26. And finally, if she won't do as you tell her, divorce her.
But wait, there's more. But wait, that's what everybody's like. Well, it says to cut her off and divorce, send her from your way. But wait, there is more. You can't just divorce her, because if you subscribe to the New Testament, there's a little treat that's left there, which is Matthew. There's some clues here, so I'm gonna go follow the clues. 19 and 29. So Sirach is saying divorce her, and Matthew 9 and 29 says, that's what it says, 19 and 29. Oh, let me make sure. Yeah, it says 19 and 21. Let's see what that says. And everyone that hath forsaken houses or brethren or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive an hundredfold and shall inherit everlasting. Oh, that was an interesting verse.
Now, I want to. Is that feedback? You have a little feedback? Okay, so remember I said that I found it really interesting that after having been in the New Testament, or that side of Malachi for so long, that he suddenly goes back to Sirach, and to make the assertion that sin in 24, this is 25 verse 24, sin began with a woman, and we must all die because of her. But if he had stayed on that side of Malachi, and 1 Corinthians 15:22, it says, for as in Adam, we all die. In the Living Translation, just as everyone dies because we belong to Adam. English. So in the New Testament, where Paul is speaking, Paul puts this on Adam and not the woman.
Hmm.
But that's not convenient. So, the question is like, why does he leave that side of Malachi and cross back over into the Apocrypha? Because if he had to find that same thought where he was, he would lose footing, because Paul gives you in his letter, in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 22. Also, actually, let's start with 21. 1 Corinthians, this is the first letter to Corinth, chapter 15, verse 22, if chapters and verses are part of epistles. But anyway, the 21st line reads, for since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. Verse 22, for as in Adam all die, and then, so in their Messiah all will be made alive. And so that's how Paul reasons with Corinth. But here, clearly the onus is on the man and not on the woman, from that perspective, or from the perspective of Paul in this portion of the text.
Very, very interesting.
Isn't
Thank you
it?
for that. I'm gonna read the warning, so that, to be fair, he does have a warning here, and I guess he kind of gives the understanding of why he. And I think maybe he quoted the wrong verse, possibly, because I thought he was going to go to a divorce verse in Matthew, but I think it went to another verse. But he says, lastly, domestic discipline is a submissive marriage lifestyle that encourages husbands to spank their wives for mistakes or misbehavior. Domestic discipline is non-erotic. Domestic discipline is an essential part of the marital relationship. Domestic discipline provides a physical correction with one who truly cares. And here's the warning. This is only a concept that has been implemented into two consenting adult relationship that works for them. I am not telling you that you should implement this in your relationship, although we just went through a whole lot of text.
Right.
But then it says, I am only presenting you with a variation of alternatives other than divorcing your disobedient spouse.
So he's providing alternatives to the wisdom of the text which tells you to separate or divorce. He's telling you how to disobey that wisdom and just beat her. So it's better to beat her and keep her than is that what he's saying? It's better just to beat her and keep her.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
okay.
It's to
Not
save
one
your
verse
marriage
supports
because
that.
it's to save your marriage. I'll read a little thing because everyone else who commented got erased. But these American, I guess, in response to why he erased everyone, these Americanized, quote, African American, end quote, women need a butt spanking,
Right.
especially if they're going to be disobedient and unsubmissive to their husbands, as agreed to in the marriage contract. The Americanized system of marriage and divorce works in the favor of the women. If you divorce her, she gets spousal support, alimony, custody of the children, child support, half of your financial assets, the house, the car, etc. Women don't like taking accountability for their wickedness, but if she agreed to the concept of domestic discipline, that means she does want accountability in your relationship. Wow, that's the L trap door at the back.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So the thought is, if you don't beat her and you divorce, not necessarily that you went to a script that possibly there's a part where it says the Most High hates divorce. You're really looking at all of the things you're going to lose if you
Mhm.
divorce, as opposed to if she agrees to let you beat her and then you don't have to divorce.
Well, I mean, and if she agrees to let you beat her, then she really loves you and is invested in the relationship. And
Yes,
that's the kind of Jedi mind tricks that you can't. I mean, when someone is that invested in creating a false narrative and is even willing to couch it in half a dozen scriptures, this is what bad doctrine is made of.
yeah,
This is exactly a bad doctrine. I mean, he says, I'm not telling you this is what you're supposed to do. I'm not telling you that you have to do it. This is simply a suggestion or alternative. If that
yeah,
is the case, then why try to make it look as if
right.
it
It's
is
scriptural. Yeah,
right? You know it's not scriptural, because if it was scriptural, then it's not a suggestion.
right.
This is what you do because it's the wisdom of the sages. It is the instruction of the creator, and this is why you do it. It's not a suggestion. And there's no alternatives. So it's this idea. This is kind of he's talking about accountability, but literally what he's doing here is absolving himself of accountability. He's like, yeah, I threw that out there, so if you pick it up, it's not my fault because I kind of put the disclaimer on it that you didn't have to do it, and I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just doing everything I can to convince you to do it, but if you do it, it's still totally your decision. And that's gotta be like the epitome of not having accountability, not being accountable to what you put out there, which is one of the reasons that you and I do so much research, is because we know that once we put it out there, we're fully accountable for the things that we have shared. And we know that if we at any time find out that we're wrong, we have to go back and make it
You have
right.
to come back and put a retraction. It's only responsible when you come out to the public. And this
Right.
is why, and the thought is that, this is the male. This is the male who's teaching this. And this is, because you have the authority, because you're a male and you're teaching things like this. And people end up into spaces and you put the scripture's signature on it. So
Right.
if it was you presenting this ideas to the brothers, like, brothers, you know what I'm saying, divorce such and such and go this way, but you went through a whole timeline of being wicked and being a fool and being, and patch quilted all of these
Mm-hmm.
things together and then laid it over her or him or whoever's listening to you and saying, like, by the way, I didn't tell you to wrap up in this blanket, but I did weave it for you. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And it does have mixed material in it. And if
It's
you
got a
do it,
cord
that's
of blue though. But I put a
right.
cord
It
of
has a
blue
quarter
on it
and you could
for
get
the
snugly,
wedges.
but it's not my fault if you fall asleep. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like, what? And this is what we need more of. We need more of respectful dialogue and examining. And I'm so glad I'm glad, even though it's disturbing. I am at least to address this. There wasn't a lot of supposition because he did lay out his thought processes. You know what I'm saying? So that we could actually have this conversation, even if he didn't show up to say this is what he was forwarding. Um, however, however interesting it may be.
I think it's good. I mean, we started off talking about, and I don't know if the people are familiar with the concepts of the cult of true womanhood, the cult of domesticity, and how some of this really has its roots in that 18th century, 19th century ideation about what the value and position of women were in society. And so this idea is something that was able to have traction because there was already the assumption and acceptance of the devaluation of womanhood, right? And they routinely would uh, create fictions like, this is what motherhood looks like. They would say this, you're a good mother if, or you're a good woman if. And all of these narratives were crafted by men. Right, the assumptions of what makes a good woman were all crafted by men with no consultation with the woman who has to actually bear some of these ideas and imaginations out. And so the cult of true womanhood and the cult of domesticity sought to imagine a value for the homebound woman, right? And give her a sense of worth, a sense of feminine value because she was tethered to the house. So if you don't really have any way to get out of there, you just kind of, if you're locked in a gilded cage, you just put up curtains and make it home. And so that was what we see happening with the cult of true womanhood and the cult of domesticity. What was interesting about those ideas is that it necessarily excluded any woman of color. All women of color were automatically not um, eligible for true womanhood because she didn't have access to running a household with servants and the like, and all the other accoutrements of upper class living. So she even got denied her womanhood on these other levels. Also, in the 18th and 19th century, what was interesting is there was this idea of coverture. And I think we talked about that in one of our other conversations as well. And coverture in the 18th century going into the 19th century was this idea that legally the woman was a non-person. The woman a married woman, not any woman, but the married woman was a non-person. Once you became married, you legally did not exist. That you became absorbed by your husband and he was the only legal entity. And so there was no education for you, no earning your own salary for you. A man or your husband could not enter into a contract with you or grant you any property because that would be acknowledging that you exist. So, if you have a mindset where the woman can literally disappear under the shadow of the man, then that lends credibility to the idea that only his voice matters, only his desires matters, only his direction matters, only what he considers good matters. And so if he is displeased in any way, then it is okay to beat you. So again, we were looking at this was a European concept. This is something that the British, the French, and
Right.
early colonial America participated in. So it was interesting to figure out, well, since the melanated woman was excluded from the cult of domesticity and the cult of true womanhood, and the woman was excluded from this idea of being the angel in the house, and so and in some cases, we weren't allowed to be legally married anyway, and we weren't considered a citizen or even a person, period. And women specifically could be sexually abused, and there was no legal recourse for her because she didn't count as a person. Like I remember this one case is infamous that a woman after having bought a young woman. She was 14 when she was bought. She sired two children for her owner, the person that purchased her, or her master. And then at some point she starts a family with another melanated person, and she's found and she's raped brutally by the master, I guess. And so I think she strikes him. I don't know, but somehow she kills the dude for putting her under. I want to say it's sexual distress, but the court decided that although the law says that you can't force, yeah, it had to be rape because there was a law on the books that said you couldn't force a woman into rape or any kind of sexual labor without her permission. But they had determined that because she was a slave, she didn't have the right to kill this man who was her master. So she didn't count as a person, even though this was not a marriage. She just wasn't a person because she was a person of color, a woman of color. So raping her was fine. It's perfectly legal to transgress those boundaries of sexual congress um, during slavery. And even now, we see that there's not a lot of redress when female bodies are being abused in sexual ways.
Correct.
So,
If you want to look it up, the name of it is for those who are listening, it's Cecilia a Slave. Even if you
right,
just after this you go and look up State of Missouri versus Cecilia a Slave and look at that case and look at the look up their findings. As Sister Ryan is saying in that case, and she was property, so according to them, you can't rape your own property, and so the raping of melanated bodies were unpunished. Um, as you were talking about it being a European concept that's being forwarded, I went on over to Amazon and I'm just going to read a few titles just to show you that we're adopting a lot of things and, like I said, busting out our crayon and trying to make it ours when we don't necessarily see this in the text. You have books that have been written by Europeans like The Lost Art of Domestic Discipline and books such as what's this? The How to Guide to Spanking and Domestic Discipline. I can't make this stuff up. When, where, and how to spank. The Spanking Guide for Wives and Husbands. How you can use spanking for submission and discipline in your relationship. Another one called Taken in Hand, a guide to domestic discipline, power exchange relationships, and related BDSM topics. And it goes on. But the point of the matter is, this is a space in which how to begin spanking. I said I wasn't going to read anymore, but this just goes on into Christian domestic disciplining, where they're taking instead of being the helpmate, that the Most High that's comparable over against him, the Azir Kanif, though I know we've heard it many times, she's put relegated to a child's position, which ultimately the child does not have the capacity to help you in the manner that she was created to help, because now you have made her a child.
right,
You see what I'm saying? As opposed to what the Most High didn't say, it's not good for man to be alone. Let me make him an inferior subordinate. That's not what the text said. It says a help over against him. That means someone who's comparable to him, that's able to balance him, that they both together can achieve the objective that the Most High has set before us. But man has put himself in the seat of the Creator.
right.
And that's a problem. I believe when in the farewell, Brother Award came on, and I appreciated Brother Award coming on. Mm. Um, when he spoke about many women not using the cognitive functions that they've been given, and as a result, they've found themselves and their family in very dark places. You see what I'm saying? The Most High gives you intuition and understanding, and if your relationship is devoid of respect, then that's not something that the man is supposed to now take the position as a father to do. That's something that that person, those two people need to go on there to reconnect with the Creator and learn to respect one another. Hey, shalom, Sister Shika, what's going on? If there's a lack of respect, and not saying there is a great lack of respect in our relationships, even when you see them online or when you see them offline, there's a disconnect there. And how far is beating the individual into submission going to get them? And ultimately, once you've done this, then are you able to be that couple before the Creator that's going to glorify His name in the earth? Like, how is your wife so your wife is so lovely and great? He's like, yeah, I beat at night. You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that? Yeah, she asked me to. It's okay. How does that work out? I don't know. I don't know. It's one mind seeker. I believe Sister Mine is speaking. Yeah, to you. It's one that we're reviewing a position that has been forwarded in the community. So at this point, if someone wants to say something, share their thoughts about what they've heard so far. I know we're probably a little shy sometimes. Um, share your thoughts about what you've heard, and as he said, they make it to seem like it's a personal choice, but at the same
Right.
time, you're forwarding this style of relationship to make it okay. I notice with a lot of so-called personal choices, you have to justify it in some way so that you're not judged. You know what I'm saying? And then he just chose to justify it by using the Bible, which I think was a bad look. But hey, so let us know your thoughts, Sister Mayana. Like we don't have too much going on.
Well, I think we could probably cause a little stir by looking at this word submission.
Uh oh.
Now, it's really interesting because what we found, and I think we've had this conversation before, whereas the ideas of female to male submission is quite frequent in the latter portion of the Bible, the anthology of the Bible, we don't find it in the original testaments. We don't find it in all of Torah. It's only mentioned one time, and the submission is not the woman to the man or the wife to the husband. The only time the word submit is used in the Torah is in Genesis 16:9, and it's the Malach telling Hagar to submit to Sarah. So we see this idea of submission in the Torah having to do with the one who is in this literal ownership position, which Sarah literally owned Hagar, and it's the only time um, the agents of heaven um, intervene to say go submit to someone. Um, when we see it again in Second Samuel. So when we go into the Tanakh, we'll see it once more, and then we'll see it three more times in the Psalms. What's interesting is that the word for submit changes. The Hebrew word changes. The submit that we see in Torah is anah, which means to trouble or look down on. And so we kind of get that sense of browbeating, I suppose, but to look down on someone. And that's what the H6031. And after that, what we see happening with some repetition in Second Samuel and parts of Psalms 1844, and I think 66 and 3 is another one, and that one is Kakash, and that's Hebrew. And if you're using the Strong's Concordance, which is um, disputably not the best. It's found under H3584. Again, the word is kakash, and it doesn't mean what we think it means. It's actually used to mean to deny, to deal falsely, to be found to be liars. And it speaks about the strangers, how the strangers in relationship to the people, enemies in relationship, I believe, to the people in Psalm 66 and 3, and again about the stranger in Psalms 1844. And that word is kakash, and it means to be seen or found to be liars, to deal falsely, to deny. We get an example of the same 3584 being used specifically meaning to deny more than to submit when Sarah denies having laughed. It's the same word. So it's interesting how submit is being used here. It doesn't have the same kind of idea of being to trouble or to look down on that we see in 6031. And finally, in 7511, this is also a psalm usage, and this is the one that we're most familiar with. The Hebrew word here is rafas, and it means to humble yourself. And this is the only time we ever see this text. Let me pull it up to give you exactly what's going on in Psalm so that we can see what this rafas is about. I'll put it back in here because submit only occurs 5 times in all of the Tanakh, whereas you get so much more of this notion on the other side of Malachi. And you don't find this kind of requisite of submission to the man in the Torah or the Tanakh. So that begs the question whether or not this is an authentically Hebrew concept that you put the man in the stead of the Most High, or that the man is the is allowed to be between, or an intermediary, or anything between you and the Most High. This idea that the man gets to interrupt the first command, that no other power is to come before the true and living power, doesn't seem to have its
So,
genesis
sister, I'm gonna
in
have to,
Genesis.
sister. They got questions because the thought is then, are you teaching that the woman is not supposed to submit? Like, what it should then be the nature of their relationship? Because they're gonna say you can't have two heads. So, what is the
No,
nature of this
you
relationship?
can't have two heads. The head is the Most High. Everyone, this idea of the man and the woman should, because we already kind of have the whole Amos thing down, that two can't walk lest they be agreed. And then there's this idea of everyone has to be on the same page, but the breadcrumbs to that, or the way that gets pieced together, is that the woman, in order to be on the same page, the woman has to go over to the man's page to be on the same page, instead of that the man and the woman meet on the page that the Most High has put in front of them. So if both of them are in submission to the Most High, then order is established. Now, what we're talking about in terms of certain types of authority, the Most High has it where whomever is right. The Most High said, whoever is right. We see that there are times when the wife is the one that the Most High is talking to. So she's the one that has the information. Sometimes he's not dealing with the husband. So again, this is very Tanakh heavy. If you're going to look at the original Hebrew thought, then we have to look at original Hebrew marriages. And in the original Hebrew marriages, the men didn't have a problem with the woman having a say or being right if she was right. We see, for example, David, who is arguably, questionable in every possible way when it comes to his relationships, when he is hot on the trail. I mean, like, what does he say? He's ready to kill everything that pisses between the against the wall. So he's not pleased. He comes with an army, not ready to have a single conversation. So when Abigail leaves with her maidens behind her and she speaks to him, he doesn't say, "Get out of my way, woman." He doesn't, at that time get, distracted by anything else. What he says is that he sees the wisdom of the Most High in her. And he thanks her for delivering this wisdom from the Creator. It's not a matter of her being a woman, is that he understood that she may have saved his life in the sense of keeping him from doing a grave, doing something that he would regret later, or doing something that might be not righteous. And so even with we'll go back to Sarah. With Sarah, um, we know that Sarah goes along with quite a few things when her husband asks her to, but she definitely takes a stand, most notably when it comes to Hagar. And Abraham doesn't see the wisdom in it at all. It says that Abraham is not pleased. He's not happy. He's upset. He's troubled. And instead of saying, I'm the man and this is, you are to submit to my every whim, he takes his displeasure to the Most High and asks. He brings it to the Most High, and the Most High says, "That's do what she says. She's right." So we see that consistently, the Most High will work through women, and that the men did not fight against it just by virtue of them being women, not righteous men. All the righteous men that we see, um, that these men are okay with righteousness coming from their wives or coming from a woman. David obviously later marries Abigail. We do see some kind of masculine resistance to being usurped. And again, usurp in this Greek idea is someone taking control or power by force. And we do see there being some resistance to that. My favorite example, of course, is Abimelech. I feel like we had an Abimelech experience recently where a woman throws a millstone over the wall and conks him on the head. And rather than, he says, never let it be said that a woman killed me. And so he has his sword bearer run a sword through him just so that no one would know that it was truly a woman that killed him. But as justice would have it, we know the story, which means that that plan didn't work, and we all know that it was truly the woman that killed him. So it's not that I am teaching anything; it's a fact
Hmm.
that we don't see submission between the husband and wife found in the Torah. That's not there. The first and only time you see submit in Torah, it's between Hagar and Sarah. When you see it again, it's 2 Samuel 22:45. The verse reads, strangers shall submit themselves unto me. As soon as they hear, they shall be obedient unto me. Psalm 18:44. As soon as they hear of me, they shall obey me. The strangers shall submit themselves unto me. Psalm 66:3. Say unto the Most High, this is God here, how terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power, thy enemies submit themselves unto thee. Finally, Psalm 68:30. Rebuke the company of spearsmen, the multitude of bulls with calves of the people, till everyone submit himself with pieces of silver. Scatter thou the people that delight in war. And after that, we cross over Malachi. We're in First Corinthians.
Okay,
So,
so
right.
no, we have someone, Alfred is saying, yes, I definitely agree with your points concerning quote unquote submission. And so one would say we don't want to leave with a, taking away something without giving the opportunity to highlight something. And thank you for those who just joined us and who will join us. But we're going, we're not going to go as long as we usually do. But we don't see. Someone will say, "All right, then, if you don't see submission, then what do you see? What if it's not submission, then what is it? What is going to keep the marriage intact? What is going to keep the husband and wife doing what it is that they're called to do? What is that if it's not submission? What word can we go to the text and see, or what examples can we see in the text?
Well, again, all the example. I mean, unless, and I'm open to hearing other ideas, but again, the examples that I've gone over so far is where um, whomever the Most High is dealing with, that's where we go. And the Most High doesn't have this kind of idea that He doesn't work through His daughters. Sometimes He's speaking exclusively through His daughters, and the men didn't have this kind of sense that their masculinity hinged on their need to overshadow the woman. That was not a Hebrew preoccupation. We have to really go back and look at what masculine identity is fragile in this space where if the woman can display some kind of wisdom or the woman is displaying some kind of leadership, that it is problematic to the male. Where does that kind of masculine fragility come from? We don't see it among Hebrew men. We don't see it among our men. We don't have any spaces where our men reacted so had this kind of visceral reaction to the competency of their women. In fact, men used to rely on that competency. The
Okay.
need for a figure. Also, our men in antiquity had jobs like being fishermen. I mean, they were gone for long periods of time. For the woman to be incompetent, unable to do certain things, would have been to the detriment of the family. So there was no expectation that she wasn't able to comport herself without, without somebody routinely spanking her to keep her in submission. The idea here, you are to submit to the Creator. Our Creator was the one that we mutually submitted to. So the idea there, because it was always this conversation of there should be no fear of submitting wholly to a man if he is righteous. And the problem there is that qualifier, if we don't, the righteousness of the man, the righteousness of mortals, the righteousness of humankind is not stable. The only thing that's stable is the righteousness of the Creator. So if the man has fully submitted to the Most High, and you have fully submitted to the Most High, you're not going to have any problems with the husband, because the husband, you and the husband are on the same page, because that page is the Most High. But if that page is the man's page, that's an unstable page. Because again, what did the brother tell me? A man falls 7 times. This is not a stable page. You cannot,
Okay.
hinge it on that. Not in Torah. Again, on this side of Malachi, it's not what's done.
Sister. I have to, I'm playing the callers right now. Until we get some. So the brother said he wanted some curry goat. You know what I'm saying? And some flatbread. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And you cleansing. You don't want to make. Not only do you not want to eat curry goat and flatbread, you don't want to make it either. Okay. Now this
Mm-hmm.
is a problem in the household. Now, what do you call that? Does one submit or does one acquiesce? You know what I'm saying? You have this not working together. It's not an unrighteous request, sister. All the brother wants is some curry goat and flatbread, and
Mm-hmm.
she is being disobedient.
Okay. So just to get this scenario correct. So the man has a desire
Mm-hmm.
for flatbread and curry goat or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she is objecting to this for the sole reason of she doesn't want to, and she's just being
No,
disagreeable
right. She's being disagreeable. Not only does she not want it for herself, she doesn't want to make it at all.
for no other reason than she just doesn't want to do it.
No,
Yes or no? There's
no,
another
no,
reason, or that's
yes,
the only
no.
reason?
But at this
But that's
point,
different.
let's make
That's not a matter of being disobedient, because he
a.
doesn't to come in and give an order. He didn't go in. He's not going to a restaurant and placing an order. So it's not that. But for someone to, just for the sake of being disagreeable, that's a personality issue. That's not okay. That's I wouldn't say that that's a transgression in terms there's no law there. Like you said, there's no law there. That's not a sin or anything, but it's not keeping shalom in the house. We go back to the wisdom of the Proverbs. It says a wise woman would build her house. Foolish woman is going to tear it down with her own hands. So to pick that kind of fight would be foolish. If it's just for the sake of, I don't like curry goat, or I don't feel like making it and I don't feel like eating it, I don't know. I think there's room for, I don't know. I think that what you described is someone who's being deliberately difficult. Um, so I wouldn't be able to defend that behavior of the woman. I think that it's interesting that, is this something she doesn't? I have to get some ID, because I'm just because it seems like such a routine kind of something that could happen in the house. She's home all day.
Right. You
I
been
can't I
here.
can't imagine somebody just, I don't know. I guess for me that just seems so
He
so
called
flighty.
you. He called you. He was at work. He called you. You at home. You know what I'm saying? He calls you or he texts you and say, yo, I could really go for some such and such. And she's over there on the Facebook or the YouTube, like,
No, that's
okay,
no no no.
I'm not doing that. She comes
No,
home. He
that's
comes
not
home.
righteous. That's not
He
that, that's
doesn't
not
smell
righteous.
anything. Or how about this? She
That's
doesn't
not
make the curry or she doesn't make the food and she orders Domino's.
that's so. See, what you're describing now just sounds like someone who's being deliberately contrary. And
Ah,
that, with someone who's being deliberately contrary, there's no justification for that. But I don't think, for me, that's not about submission. That's just about being That's not submission. That's not he's not trying to subordinate her in any way. He's not being oppressive in any way. He's not, slapping the D on the table and insisting that, his XY chromosomes are what dictate something. He's at work and he's saying, I'm hungry and this is something that I would like
But
to eat. I don't
she
see
says,
why
I
any.
got you something. I got you Papa John's. I got you pizza.
Right, but if I specifically tell you that I'm looking for one thing and then you get me what you want to get me, that's being deliberately contentious.
And see, this is the thing. Some brothers, and why did Alfreda say divorce papers? I can't. But these are some of the things that no, according to the brother, not divorce papers, the paddle. But but no, these are some of the things that are bring contention in the household because of roles that people may not agree with. Um, why do you always get to pick the meal? You know what I'm saying? These are
But
like
see,
real
that's what
time.
I'm asking you. What else is
Yeah.
going on in the
Oh,
conversation?
you
If
want
it's
to
just,
know? You want to get all in their business?
well, I mean, because like we always say, there's got to be
Yeah,
context to
there gotta
something.
be a
If it's
backstory.
something,
Well, he always wants to suggest what is to eat. He never gives her an opportunity. Let me just, I'm just making up a scenario here. He never gives her an opportunity to hear what he feels. He's the man. He's the head of the household. It's
see,
him, and then her, and then the children, right?
okay, so
And
that's different. See, that's why I asked you. Is she just being contentious for no reason with
right, but
nothing going on?
yeah, she was shy. She didn't want to tell you, but that this was going on. But now
Well,
here
then
she is,
that's unjust. Now,
and you
now that's
pulled it out of
unjust.
her now, right?
Oh, okay, okay, because I'm cool like that. So that's unjust weight. That's unjust balance. The Most High says that a false balance is an abomination. So there's no balance in that relationship where she's not where what she wants to eat, or she's never considered by him. The only consideration he has is of himself. That's a man that's selfish. We know that's a quality that a man should not have. That's a quality that should not be in a marriage. So this is not something that if she were to push back against or she were to respond to, that's being a person. That's saying that I feel an injustice. That's dealing with an injustice. It's an injustice to to be considered a non-person. That goes back to this idea of the coverture where the woman is a non-person and the only fully human person in the relationship is the man. That's not Torah.
We have some addition. We have sister Sheikah saying being at home is hard. You can plan all day and things can take a turn. Is the food there? Does she have to go to the market? What's the weather like? Did something extraordinary happen with the children? These are all of the scenarios. Like when we're talking, like at the end of the day, we're talking about real life relationships. We're talking
Right.
about things that really happen with people. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of like to bring it down to earth because these are the little tiny things that build up, and then it
Uh-huh.
gets to the point where you're like, oh, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? Or she's such and such, and he's such and such. And it's really these little small things that
Right.
happen along the way. Like you're saying, okay, so that means he may not be acknowledging her as a soul. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And everything that he wants is put upon her, and it's her job to, because she's his subordinate, to work for him. And she
Right.
may become resentful or indifferent because he approaches her in that manner. And maybe he's approachable, or maybe he's not approachable. And so some will say she's the wife, so she submits to what the husband wants, and that will make a peaceable um household. I think I saw somebody, memes these days. I want to remember the latter part of the meme where they're pushing back on the idea that a happy wife is a happy life. And they said something like, I gotta go see it again. It's something like a happy husband, something they said to where the thought is that you cater to the needs of the wife,
Yeah.
and in the street they call you being whipped, you know what I mean? And you doing
Yeah.
everything that the wife says. So there's an imbalance on one side, and then to overcorrect it, there becomes an imbalance on the other side. And so we're really, for those who just joined us, we're looking at this thought process of submission. Would that be an offense for someone who just subscribes to domestic discipline? Will that be an offense that she can be beaten for?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If he wants to have a certain meal and she pushes back or she doesn't provide exactly what he says, that she can be subjected to, I think, four different types of discipline. There's the lecture, the corner time, bedtime, obviously the spanking, and what was the fourth one? removing of privileges, right? Or removing of privileges.
So she doesn't get the D. I think I was seeing something.
Well, yeah, there was the remove, right? You don't get, like the brother said, the rod. You don't get that, or also other privileges like you can't go on your social media, you can't wear makeup, any other thing that you might enjoy. Those privileges get taken from you, as if you were a child. So you get infantilized. Again, this is not a balanced relationship. This is not a husband and wife. This is a father and a
Hmm.
child. The woman has become infantilized in the relationship, which means she's been deactivated in her feminine principle. We get in Genesis, the Most High told us what she's supposed to do. So if you have reduced her to your offspring, you have removed the Most High's design and put your own plans into a creation not your own. That woman is not your creation. You're not her father. You're not her spiritual father, her physical father, or any of the like. You cannot infantilize her. If you do, then you deactivate your greatest asset. And I think, as you alluded to or stated outright earlier, then you are still alone. The Most High said it's not good for the
Right, you
man to
still
be
alone.
alone, right? But then if you tell her to sit down and be quiet and only say the thoughts that you give her, then you're still alone because only your thoughts are in the room.
Something to think about. There's something to think about. And maybe some people say that, hey, Most High, if it wasn't for her, you know what I'm saying, I wouldn't be in this situation. So there's some who would rather the company of their male companions, as you like to say, in a kind of homosocial environment where the voices that matter most are the voices of males. And this thought of having a counterbalance, having the feminine principle there, is not important. Is not as important, and because oftentimes men say they don't understand women. Like I saw somebody put like this long contractual looking thing with a very fine print, and then it says all the things you need to do to make the woman happy. So this thought of not being, she's so complicated that you can't understand her, and there's only certain limited spaces that you can relate to her in. It causes a breakdown also in communication. And we get to the point where we have to have this discussion about whether or not she's being unruly or she's being disobedient, and whether or not, as a way in which to not divorce her and have her, leave you high and dry. The dude said, he said it's cheaper to keep her, and so he wants to keep her in peace. And so, he's forwarding this idea because that will have her in line, and he'll still have some of his assets. That right there just said everything.
I think
Um,
what you said right now is important because in the scenario that you gave, what would be necessary between that couple is the conversation and the communication. But both of them would have to be of the mindset that the other person has value. She would have to be willing to hear why he um, says the things that he says or approaches things the way he does. And he would have to listen to and care when she says, I find this frustrating or I find whatever, difficult. And then they can have a conversation. But if there's, like you said, the breakdown of communication, if there's an existing devaluation between the couple, that kind of a cut, and again, we have this concept of oneness, that's not going to happen because there isn't this idea of them coming mutually together in one space. It's the idea of the man absorbing the woman, and then there's only, and then there's only one, right? Because
right.
he has consumed her, he has absorbed her, and she has disappeared under him. That's not the same as the two of them coming together and becoming one because they're of one mind, of one agreement, and they're going in the same direction. That's a different type of a cut, right? And I think that's the problem. We are fighting to be the last man standing. The women do it, the men do it. I won't say this is only the idea of the men, but the idea of being the last man standing rather than being a united front. And I think we really have to come to terms with one is good for nation building and one is good for destroying the nation.
Hmm. Hmm. So it all depends on what your goal and objective is. We
Okay.
have afraid of coach says Malachi 2 speaks on the wife being a companion. A companion is meant to complement and match each other, even compromise at times. Being selfish is a sign of a treacherous husband spoken of in Malachi. That's another topic. But
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna have to come back and talk about that. We're gonna talk more about the wicked woman, because that needs to be spoken about. I've seen many spaces where when the men attack this topic, attack, and I mean attack the topic, is because there's a lot of unresolved issues, and the way in which the topic come across is, you visualize this wicked woman. You know what I mean? Like she has taken form in your mind, and you just swing your sword, and whoever it hits, and I'm like, wow, okay. But we definitely have to talk about what wickedness looks like in the man and the woman, like it says in is it Ezra or was it Sirach? Wisdom of Sirach. What this wicked man and what this wicked woman looks like.
Right.
It's Sirach, right? You know, these are some of the things that we're talking about because again, some things may be subjective, again, depending on who, the likes or dislikes and the things that are not necessarily against Torah, but are personal for that person. I like such and such, and if the person doesn't do it for you, you might translate that as the person is wicked. You see what I'm saying? So, like Alfreda is saying, this is a give and take, a continuous in a relationship where some people don't think that it's just one sided, and you can justify the person coming over to your side by manipulation, which is what this is. You know what I'm saying? You're manipulating the person towards your will, something that they wouldn't normally do. And we have to kind of look at why we do those things and if it's healthy ultimately in the end. Children seeing that you're getting beat or aware that you're getting beat and that you are relegated to their level. How do you turn around and look at your child and be like, oh, you're behind her, mine too. I got, what I mean? What kind of conversation is that? You're debased in their eyesight. Um, which
You know,
is
yeah. Wait, what's going on? There's a lot of feedback. I don't know if the mic is too close. Okay. There's a book. I think it's available elsewhere, but I have it in my PDF file. It's called Reframing Paul: Conversations in Grace in the Community. And there's a section where they are discussing the book Battered into Submission: The Tragedy of Wife Abuse in the Christian Home. So again, as we were talking about at the top of the conversation, this domestic discipline also has a companion or maybe even a genesis in the Christian domestic discipline. This is idea that is rooted in Christian ideas or biblical ideas. So the brother Ike that kind of brought this back or resurfaced this topic isn't alone in thinking that the Bible, you can couch this idea in biblical principles. So anyway, in this book, Reframing Paul: Conversations of Grace and Community, there is a quote from the Battered into Submission: The Tragedy of the Wife Abused in the Christian Home. And it looks at how the church or, is complicit. And so in this case, we're not talking about Christian churches, but even obviously in our own culture, our own communities. And here's a quote. It says, it's a quote from one of the stories they collected in their surveys. They did a series of surveys. And one of the responses was all three pastors. So this woman had gone through several counseling sessions, and she says all three pastors said a man was, quote, head of the family, close quote, and I must endure whatever he did. Remember, we talked again about this idea happening on the other side of Malachi that you do whatever the man says. And so it says one woman wrote, and then it has like the ellipsis to tell you the conclusion. Since filing for divorce, that woman added, only two older women in her church talked to her. I'm an outcast, being the victim of, quote, church discipline for divorce, although my husband's behavior is well known. And so this excerpt shows that when you have a certain idea or you have interpreted the verses of portions of the Bible to say that the man has the same weight as the Most High, then you have these pastors who believe they are his messengers reinforcing this idea. And so the woman feels she has no redress. The woman feels she has nowhere to go. And so the woman winds up filing for divorce because it's only so much imbalance and abuse that a person can withstand. And having no righteous recourse is always extremely problematic. There's another one. I don't know if I remember. She says, there's another quote from the same book. Almost without exception, women report that their pastors focus on getting them, not their abusive husbands, to change. Comments by pastors in our sample confirm that stance. One minister said his approach with abused women is to involve them in Bible studies because the studies take their minds out of the home situation for a while, implying that his goal is to keep the wife preoccupied rather than to work for change. What this technique communicates to the battered woman is that the responsibility for change is hers. It becomes a spiritual strategy for blaming the victim. And so there's some of that we see that the onus is on the woman. The woman has to change. The man falls 7 times. You have to adjust yourself to whatever state he's in. So if he's in the fallen state, then you have to level up and kind of adjust and get used to it and just kind of deal with his mood. And if not, as is the case in domestic discipline, you subject yourself to abuse, uh, and no matter what this discipline language is, it's abusive. It was interesting to read in one of the articles that the woman, I think it was XO Jane, that's the name of the blog, she said that domestic discipline is not to be confused with uh, what is it, DSMD or DSMB, however the acronym goes, but that's bondage, sadomasochism. It's not the same. And she she brings this distinction. She says that in sadomasochism and bondage and the like, there's a safe word. And so it's her opinion that that's cheating. You're not really submissive if you get to have a safe word. That's kind of like a get out of jail free card. In domestic discipline, there is no safe word. So you're fully trusting that the dude is going to stop before he does any kind of fatal harm to you. That he gets to beat you until he's just got it out of his system. And so that's the difference between domestic discipline and that other kind of sadomasochism, which also has a sexual component. This book that I was telling you about, Battered into Submission, is written by two doctors. James Asdorf apparently is a forensic psychologist, and he says that any man that, this is what he concluded, that any man that would participate in this has a he basically says there's something wrong with him and has a deficit in the area of intimacy. And so this is not a healthy thing. This is not a biblical thing. This is not a righteous thing. This is something you need to work out because there's a deficit, a psychological deficit, an emotional deficit, some kind of sexual intimacy deficit that anyone who wants to do this really needs to work out. So there's a lot of psychological insight by these doctors of psychology on the subject. So this is not something Amun and I are just kind of dragging out because we're
Right,
picking
right.
on the men again. But like, oh, they just don't like the men. Everything we say they're going to object to. It's
You
not
know,
that.
no, absolutely not. And I'm gonna give y'all an update on that. But I'm gonna see. Thank you for that, Sister Mine. For those who just joined us, we're gonna wind down a little bit here in a minute. I think we've kind of gone through this. Brought out a tail comb here and kind of combed out all of the little fine areas, all at the nape of the neck of this conversation, to see that this is doesn't find its roots in biblical um Torah spaces, and that it's actually coming from somewhere else that we're looking to adopt it over. Alfreda says, my thoughts as well. How can a child follow the law stating honor your mother as well as your father if the mother is getting the same discipline as the child?
Mm-hmm.
The
Good
child
point.
will see her as an equal and not as a mother. And that is correct. And that debases the child in the sight, I mean, the mother in the sight of the child. And as she's saying, it has other adverse effects. So, This is something for us to think about when, as he's saying, he's not telling you to do it, but this is something that you can possibly employ according to his estimation to avoid divorce, right? So again, as we've read and continue to do your research and your studies, if you get any more information on this topic, feel free to leave it under the box. I have had pushback, not on the biblical side, but on the YouTube side. Let me just give you out a few before we go out here. On the YouTube side, I've had some pushback. People really being upset with me. You know, what do I know? And what is the melanated woman supposed to do in order to get her in line?
Oh, is
Um,
that from what you did before, or that's a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna get it now, just so y'all can hear some of the pushback. Because I think it's fair when other people are here to represent their thoughts and opinions. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes when you don't necessarily agree with it, then that comes through with the conversation. And so it's only fair to have their voices heard, um, so that we can hear the other side of this argument. And again, like I said, they're not coming from biblical, but these are why uh some people subscribe. Um, they hold on. Somebody's mad. They said don't take advice from single black women. They're just all assumptions. And swirlers, whatever that means. DD is a great practice, and the person says it's a gift from the Most High.
Mm.
Yeah, if you can believe that. So I asked about making assumptions, which they made gross assumptions, and I said, you have your opinions. Nonetheless, spousal beatings are not spoken of nor endorsed in biblical narrative. The person says, so you just basically leave out the alpha woman. This is the part I found interesting. They say, so you just basically leave out all the alpha women who are bossy, curse out their men, take their men's money. We aren't naturally submissive like you, so we need help. This is a woman who's speaking from
Mm-hmm.
our husbands. Spankings can save marriages.
See, now, wasn't that one of the things that we said, that I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation? Is that's deeply troubling that a woman feels like that she doesn't have the ability
Mm-hmm.
to govern herself, and that she needs to be spanked. And that says to me that I would have questions about her childhood, her rearing, who was
Right.
able to, like, where did she find discipline growing up? Was there a father there who disciplined? What is she making up for here? For her to need her husband to take the role,
To do
literally
right,
taking the role of a father. She's asking
right.
her husband to be her father. She's talking about she's bossy and she doesn't know how to
To
govern
stop
herself.
herself. Right. She
Right.
doesn't know.
So
Which
that's a
I
different
found
problem.
I found that so interesting. So I came back and said, again, I have and continue to create content that speaks to personal accountability. If we as adults need and rely on external stimulus to quote act right, end quote, then we are lacking. The same thing you said. I said alpha female doesn't equal bossy curse out their men.
Correct.
Broken females do that.
Okay.
Women who are damaged by the trauma of their experience, and because of that, they are out of touch. Self government is the key, not reverting back to childhood. Nonetheless, as always, if you feel very passionate, feel free to join us as we continue the conversation on air. I never heard from that person again, but who I did hear from was somebody else named Angel Christina Stone. And I'm reading it because again, it's lending it's allowing the other side of it, even though they're not physically here. I'm reading their words so that you can hear some of the pushback. They said, my parents have this type of marriage, meaning Didi, and have been married for 40 years. I married a man who practices DD. So for not the person who you asked where it came from, but this particular person says they accepted it because they saw it. My parents didn't choose my husband, but definitely wanted me to marry a man who would keep me in DD environment. My dad also practiced discipline, including maintenance spankings and punishments on his off days, usually over the weekends. Because of how me and my siblings were raised right, and we are all college grads and have good jobs, not involved in criminal activities. My husband and I raised my children the same way. Saturday is when me and the kids are handled. We are a happy family for it. I was taken aback.
Yeah, I don't even.
Yeah, I was like, you want to come on and talk about this?
Okay, but it's very interesting that she is associating, because the DD is about the marriage practice. So her somehow, I think that it's interesting that there's an overlap between how her father spanked her mother. And she's saying, I don't know, that the DD environment doesn't have anything to do with the children. The DD environment has to do with the married couple. The other part of that is parenting. That's parents. How the parents deal with the children is called parenting. It's interesting that when she goes into her adulthood and she's looking at herself and her husband and her children, she says Saturdays when me and the kids are handled, which is exactly what the sister in our chat said when she said that line gets blurred between the mother and the child. She because she has blurred the lines growing up, it sounds like, now that she's an adult with a husband that has the same D I said D environment, that she even now identifies on the same level as the children. This is when me and the children are handled. That's very um, uncomfortable language to hear as an adult. I wish she would have taken you up on your offer to join us for this conversation. I would love to
I
have.
know no one takes me up. I don't know why. But yeah, definitely go for, so the least that I can do is read some of what happened, and where I see somebody, some of them are picking it up, and how some are really upset about the situation, and others are saying, I have one more comment here. Bottom line is, and I guess this is great to go out on because people say it's a personal choice, right? So bottom line is, it doesn't really matter what the blink you guys think. This is not between you and them. It's between the two people in the relationship. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. What's stay the blink out of other people's lives? You wish to do it. It's not abuse and it's not BDSM. It's biblical. Here comes somebody else again. If you don't like it or believe it, that's just too blinky bad. Deal with it. I'm sick of people trying to badmouth this lifestyle when they know absolutely jack poo poo about it. That goes to prove arrogant. I didn't rightly ignore what? That goes to prove arrogant. I didn't rightly ignore you guys are, or ignorant you guys are, sorry. Have a nice day. And once again, I invited this person to the panel and they didn't show up. So once again, we have someone who goes under the moniker of Dog Vader coming and saying that it's biblical and that you should mind your business.
While offering no supporting text. Right? And so that's pretty much, again, to on the ending notes, what you will find is that we don't argue against men or women. We interrogate information. And so if the information is forwarded and not supported, then we're going to kind of excavate it, and look for support, either something that supports it as true or something that exposes the inaccuracies of it. So although we've been told that domestic discipline is supported biblically, we have yet to find such a text. Um, I, for one, will concede that if you go to a certain section, if you go to the latter part of the text of the anthology after Malachi, you will find a lot of discussion about the subjugation, submission, and the like of the woman. But if you look at the earlier text, we don't find that particular dynamic in the Hebrew marriage. In the Hebrew marriage, the woman is expected to have some agency. She's expected to have a voice. She's expected to seek justice. We see consistently that women are part of this justice um, mission, and the men are not upset by it. and it's not even difficult to give example after example of women speaking up for justice, not just for themselves, but and even influencing policy, legal policy for the nation, setting legal precedences because they have spoken up and sought justice, and people didn't get um, distracted by their uterus and decide that they are not um, credible to do so. So again, this is not to say that the woman should overpower, ignore, or I don't know, oppress the male. It's to say that where there is balance and communication and conversation, and the two are walking in the righteousness of the true and living power, then this is where we function at our optimal best. That everyone is doing what the Most High has issued, walking in the fear and obedience of the Creator, and there isn't this power structure struggle again to kind of go back to the words not being the last man standing, but instead being a united front, standing together under
All
one
right.
goal, right? One shared goal.
All right. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. That was the discussion on that. If you don't agree with the findings, feel free to leave it in the box. If you do agree and you want to expand, feel free to leave your comments below. Make sure you continue to share. Comment if you are happen to be on Facebook. Put your thought processes. We got a lot of Man, we got a lot of show ideas. And we're not the only one carrying the show, y'all. So since we have a lot of show ideas, some of the people who have like Sheikah dropped an interesting show idea. And definitely will be a great addition to the discussion. So if you have show ideas and you have a research on the show ideas and information you want to forward, then I'm saying come through. Come through. Because we're all here to learn, each one teach one. So with that said, I thank everybody for tuning in. I hope everybody have a blessed night. All praise be to the Most High, the Holy One of creation. And see you back again next time. All right.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.